Welcome back. We're joined this afternoon by our political strategist, Bruce Hawker and Grahame Morris. Bruce, it's clear in the polling numbers that things are dire for Labor. Looking at history, can it be turned around in time for the September election?
It has been turned around in the past, but not by the Labor Party. That's the problem.
Right. John Howard
did it in 2001. There was an age poll taken in 2001 that had Labor on 60 and the government on 40. And of course, by engaging in that wedge politics, which Crosby really perfected for them, they managed to win the 2001 election off the back of Tampa and refugees. And I just don't think Labor's in a position to do something like that. They're not going to. Obviously, not on refugees.
September 11 came along.
It did, and really, it consolidated a sense of in the electorate that there has to be a security focus.
Technically, it is possible. If you're John Howard, what about for Julia Gillard?
Well, I think it's really grim for Labor. I think that's the reality that we're
Are you saying you don't
here.
think they can win this election?
I think it's going to be incredibly difficult, and I think anybody who's thinking and talking clearly and honestly is going to say the same thing. I know we don't want to go down that path, and where there's life, there's hope. They have to start going after Tony Abbott on policy issues. I know they've been doing that, but I think they really have to bring the focus onto him. I mean, for example, this idea of 100 dams being built in the life of a Liberal government. I mean, that's crazy.
I don't think that's actually their policy.
Well, they floated an idea. It's a bit like let 100 flowers bloom. Let 100 dams fill, and let's see what happens. We put the ideas out there, and then we can walk away from it if we don't like it. I think they've got to be nailed for that.
But isn't getting back to what Labor can do? Isn't the big option in the bottom drawer still Kevin Rudd?
Well, Kevin Rudd's not allowing that option to be taken. That's the reality that we're dealing with.
Because his language yesterday here on Sky News was pretty clear that he isn't going to challenge and doesn't want to be drafted.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
Yeah, I do. And I think that's
you don't think he'd be willing to be drafted if the party came to him and said, we need you?
Well, I can go on the basis of what he's saying, and that was pretty clear and unequivocal that that he's saying, I'm not the man for the job.
It's not going to happen.
The party's spoken. So they have to then craft ways of dealing with the issue. I think they have to really focus on bread and butter Labor issues, and I think yesterday was an attempt to do that by opening up the jobs issue. Obviously, there are going to be people in the business community who are going to be unhappy about being required to give preference, at least in bid, at least in consideration of a bid to Australian labour or Australian products.
But do you think that's the right sort of?
Grahame, I think it's in the right area.
Grahame, do you have as much faith in Kevin Rudd ruling out a return?
Look, Malcolm Fraser came back against Hayden in 1980. Houston blew himself up against Keating. It can be done. But if you're looking at the Labor Party now, what could they do? They could get rid of the Prime Minister and go to Kevin Rudd. That would be a stopper, although the ads the Coalition would run that night would be pretty deadly. So Kevin would have to get over that phase. Simply, Simon Crean thinks he's a goose, Nicola Roxon thinks this. It'd be a devastating ad. So he'd need to get over that phase. Or they could jump both of them and have a sort of a unity ticket of one person, and that's Bill Shorten. That would be a real game changer. The other alternate for them is that somehow or other Tony Abbott gets hit by a bus, a truck, a Russian asteroid and something else. But, none of those are going to happen. And the difficulty is it's not a policy issue anymore. The electorate is just not listening to the Prime Minister anymore, so it doesn't matter what the policy stuff she comes up with. They've got to do something. I suppose they could try that this is the new real whiter than white, Julia, and see how that goes and see if you can change again. But they've tried that trick.
But hang on, you seem to be saying there that policy doesn't matter in this election year. Is that right? So
no, I'm saying at the moment it doesn't matter what the Prime Minister comes up with policy stunts. The electorate is not listening to her.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. The government did get onto a pretty good sort of a narrative halfway through last year, and they stuck on it for quite a while. And you know, and the polls actually showed a recovery. You know, and so they started talking about issues that really concern people. They started talking about the National Disability Insurance Scheme, which could be presented as a strong Labor initiative. Gonski, even though you know that hasn't been all sorted out yet, is Labor territory. It's about increasing funding to schools and making us a truly competitive nation into the 21st century. These are all things that the electorate associates with Labor, and I think they have to keep pushing that, regardless of how hard it is, regardless of how difficult you know the challenges are. They're not going to give up, and nor should they. They've just got to keep going to the issues that they think that the electorate is going to say, yes, they're good Labor things, you know, jobs. And it doesn't hurt to remind the electorate about what was left behind, you know, work choices,
but do you share
a $900 million cut to health by Tony Abbott.
It doesn't matter what Julia Gillard tries to focus on here, whether it is those good Labor things?
No, I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that, because halfway through last year they started to focus on those sorts of issues, and it had an impact on the electorate. So we know that there's no great love for Tony Abbott out there. They can you know, crow about the poll right now and how he's improved in his ratings against Julia Gillard, but I don't see that as being a great endorsement of Abbott. I think there's a lot of polling that tells us that the electorate's pretty sceptical about Tony Abbott. I think a much worse you know, eventuality would be if someone like Malcolm Turnbull came on board. I mean, that would be a shocking problem for Labor, but that's clearly not going to happen the way the polls are at the moment.
Just getting back to Kevin Rudd, now, while you're saying you believe that he's not interested, do you think if he was, it would make a difference?
Oh, I do. Yes, I do, and I've never resiled from that. I've always felt
you think he could win an election?
That he's the person who could win an election for Labor, and Malcolm Turnbull's the person who could win an election for the Liberal Party.
But what gives you the confidence, looking at the numbers, that Kevin Rudd could defeat Tony Abbott?
Well, you look at the polls, you look at the AC Nielsen came out today, it just shows that he's a much more popular figure. People respect him. You saw the interview on Sky yesterday. You know, that was an incredibly well-watched program, I'm given to believe, and I think that's an indication of the interest that they have in him, but he's not a candidate. So this is an academic discussion we're having here. But
well,
I'm not going to pretend...
It's a discussion going on privately amongst a lot of Labor MPs.
Maybe it is. I'm not in Canberra, I'm in Sydney. But I can tell you this, that it's an academic discussion, because Kevin Rudd has said that he's being frozen and
cryogenically frozen. Graham, do you agree it's an academic, whether it's an academic discussion or not, do you agree that a change to Kevin Rudd could potentially put Labor in a winnable position?
Don't go to me, go back to Bruce. Look, I know the commercial that would run on air that night, and it would run for the first week, and it would be deadly.
But would it really make a difference after a week? Would people, move on from that?
Well, probably not, but there'd be a second phase which said, hey, this is the bloke who did X, Y and Z and was all over the place. And look, there would be a number of people come out of the woodwork who would not be very complimentary. And also, we've had more proof today that the Prime Minister is the union's lady. She's their girl. And you've got this awful thing at the moment where she's being backed by the trade union movement, and we know that in various sections of it, they stink. If I were them, as Kevin has tried, you'd try and walk away from the trade union movement and run as Mr. Clean Skin. If I were him, that's what I'd be doing, but the Labor Party's never going to let him do that again.
Well, we will have to wrap it up there. Grahame Morris, Bruce Hawker, good to talk to you both, and we'll catch up next week and see where things are at by then. Appreciate your time. Cheers.
Thank you.
After the break, we're going to check in on the latest